Hey everybody, I'm going to be using up some turkey that I need to get into jars pretty quick here. I just posted a video that my freezer died and I have been just kind of canning food like a crazy person to save as much as possible. And I had a bunch of turkey legs and wings, backs, necks, all that kind of stuff. Because last year I had bought a bunch of turkeys on clearance for between 25 and 45 cents a pound. And I bought, maybe 8 of them or so. Anyway, I usually, because some of them were fresh, I cut them into parts and I make a lot of boneless turkey breasts and things like that. That's already, all the boneless stuff was already processed and in jars, as I mentioned in the last video. But when I roasted the legs and the wings, etc., I picked off as much of the meat, and I have a big bag here. I weighed it, it's just under 6 pounds that needs to get finished processing. And I thought I would show you some of the recipes I'm doing. So let me show you where I'm at, and we'll take it from there. Okay, well, so far, like I said, this is my big bag of, it's mostly turkey. There's a little bit of chicken in there. I think I had one whole chicken. That I had pulled the breasts off. I'm going to make some chicken salad for dinner. And then the little bit of leg and thigh meat and stuff is in here. The rest of this is all turkey. And it's just under 6 pounds. And what I'm going to do is I need to cut this up into smaller pieces. You can see I've got a bunch of jars ready to go. And I'm going to take and fill those jars halfway with turkey meat. And then I have some celery, onions, carrots, mushrooms, and I'm going to be flavoring these different. So some of them will get all of it, some of them will get some of it. There's I'm going to make a chicken pot pie, so I'm going to have to add some potatoes, but I'm going to do those at the last minute because they turn brown. And then I'm going to do like a chicken a la king, or I should say turkey, since this is all turkey. Turkey a la king, some marsala, and a few other things. So I'm just going to start right now by stuffing the jars with the meat. And then I'll come back and we'll talk about the various things that are going in each jar. All right, I got each jar a good halfway full of the chopped up turkey. And each recipe, I'm doing chicken a la king. I'm calling it chicken marsala, but I'm doing a balsamic vinegar instead of the marsala wine, piccata, and a pot pie. So each recipe gets... every single one of them has onion in it. So I'm just going to divide up I have a bag of chopped onions, and I'm going to divide these up between each of the jars, starting with a tablespoon. And then I'm going to, follow the rest of the recipes. It's not till I get to some basic things. For example, the chicken or turkey a la king has pimentos in it. So they'll only go in that recipe. Of course, the marsala is only getting the balsamic vinegar, etc. So I also need to tell you these are considered rebel canning recipes. I did find, or at least the inspiration for all of these was found online from people who are long-term canners like I am. So, if you don't want to follow these recipes because they're not USDA approved, please do not do so. Of course, this is at your own risk. And I'm just confident that everything I'm doing is, maybe hasn't been completely tested, but all the components have been canned before. All right, celery is going to be pretty easy. The only recipe that actually calls for celery is the pot pie. So I'm just going to put a little bit of celery in there. That's it for the celery. Okay, so I'm going to do some carrots. These were homegrown. I took these out of my garden last night and chopped them up. Now, the only thing, again, that calls for it is the pot pie. But I think I'm going to add some to my a la king because that's usually how I do it. When I'm making it after Thanksgiving, I like to have a little bit in there, so I'm just going to add a little bit to each jar Now, the pot pie I have to be careful with because I'm going to get some potatoes in there too. And if necessary, I can divide down that chicken just a little bit. I can actually scoop it out of the jars and, you know, mix it together and put it back in there. So I am going to put a little bit, 1 tablespoon in my a la king, because I do like the flavor and I like the color. Of course, you do get the pimentos in there too, but that's the way I like it. And that's the nice thing about making your own recipes. The last thing I have right now is mushrooms. And they go in the a la king, the marsala, and I could put them in the pot pie, but I'm going to leave those out. So mushrooms I really like a lot. So we're going to put, I did say the a la king, yes I did. Yeah, these are going to be easier to do with my hands. They want to fall off of here. And again, you can change this however you like it. I might add some to my piccata just because. Like I said, we really like mushrooms here. Now, the other thing too is it's nice because I'm going to add, I have some vegetable broth that I made. And anything left over, I have some cabbage to use up. I can always make some cabbage soup as well. And I'm going to add it to my marsala, correct? Definitely. You're going to get a lot of mushrooms because I like mushrooms. So the marsala has a lot of space. It's going to get lots of mushrooms. If I had my canning thing, my funnel, it would be a little less messy, but don't worry guys, you know, I tell you every time I wash my hands before I start all of this. I've had people comment how gross it is, but you know what, I'm eating the food. It's going to be pressure canned for 75 minutes. I don't think if I do have any germs, it's going to affect much. Now the jars won't look completely full when I'm done because once I run them through the pressure canner, things like these mushrooms are going to really shrink down. I may go back to the piccata and add a few extra things to it because that looks pretty empty to me. And I don't know what I'm missing in there. Okay, well, it doesn't have a whole lot to put in it, which surprises me. Now, I want to leave an inch of headspace in here. I know my mushrooms are going to shrink, so I'm not going to overdo it though. And I'm just, because I have them, I'm going to add a few mushrooms to my piccata because, again, it's my recipe. And I can add what I like. All right. So that's my main vegetables. Now I have to go back and chop my potatoes for this. But I'm going to finish these off because I want to do the potatoes absolutely last so they don't turn colors on me. The first, I guess you want to call it seasoning. To each jar, I'm going to add some, I have pre-minced garlic. Everything except the pot pie calls for garlic. Just going to add, this is a half a teaspoon to each container, except for the pot pie. But I hate to say it, I like garlic. I might just go ahead and add some anyway, because I add garlic to everything. I don't know about you guys, but I do. And instead of adding extra garlic powder, maybe I'll just add a little to my pot pie. I figure you can't get enough flavorings in most of these anyway. And I want to tell you guys, I got very lucky. Went to a garage sale. It was kind of in the middle of the week, which was odd. I stopped at it and I saw an All-American 921 canner there. I was looking at it. Another lady looked at it. She walked away from it and left. I started looking at it, and we found the problem was you could not get the lid off to save your life. The lady's husband came out, and there was one that he simply could not get undone. So he went and got a wrench and tried to twist that one off, and it broke the toggle thing on it. I took a brief look at my recipe again and found out the Marsala takes double the garlic. So anyway, I'm going to add more to that jar, to those jars, another half teaspoon. So anyway, couldn't get the top off. She wanted $50 for the canner, and while her husband was fighting with it, she said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll do 20 if you can take it as it is. And I was like, you know, it's an all-American. I looked at it and I realized that most likely that one was stuck because it was so full of crud and dust and stuff that maybe I could get it open at home. So I took it home and sprayed oil on every single one of the screws that the toggle goes onto. Was just full of dust and crud. And I sprayed them really well and scrubbed them off with a little wire brush, and lo and behold, the top popped open. It's in perfect condition. The only thing is that I have to order, I wanted to upgrade it because it only has the gauge on it, and I like to have the little rockers on it or whatever that makes the noise, the weight. So I ordered the weights, and the conversion kit was another $20. In the meantime, I had planned on waiting for that to come in before I started pressure canning, but it's not here yet because I just found it. And so I am using the gauge, but I'm getting it closer to 15 pounds, although 10 is only necessary in my area just to be safe. All right, so that was that for that recipe. I'm looking at my recipes just to see what all uses the same stuff. One of these, the Marsala, calls for some thyme, a 1/4 teaspoon, and now that's for a quart. So I'm going to use, my spoon says a dash or a pinch, and I think a dash is probably a little less. So I'm going to put a little bit of thyme in the Marsala. I'd rather have to add a little bit later because you don't want it too strong. I'm going to add just a little bit of that too, because of course it's going to be in my soup stock as well. So that's the only one that gets thyme. And then I have poultry seasoning in my pot pie. That one calls for a teaspoon per quart. I'm going to use a 1/2 teaspoon for each pint. Just a little. I'm going to go a little shy on a 1/2 because I could find that a little overpowering sometimes. And I might, be stronger once you can it. Okay, I have some parsley, dried parsley. Now, I do follow the rules, quote unquote, by the USDA that I do not use fresh herbs in my recipes. I do use dehydrated. I'm going to put this is going in the Ala King, the parsley goes in the Ala King, and the Marsala. All right, and then they're all going to get salt and pepper, but I'm not adding that to each jar. I am going to make sure that my stock is well flavored with salt and pepper before I put it in the jars. If you're using like chicken broth from the store, or you make your own and you don't add any salt to it, go ahead and add it to your jars in the amount of, a 1/2 teaspoon per jar. I'm not doing that because I'm going to make sure my stock is very well seasoned. Okay, to my Ala King, I am going to divide up this jar of pimentos. It's a 4-ounce jar, and I'm just going to put a little bit into each jar, fairly equal, probably not totally equal, but the best I can. Sorry for being in the way. All right, so the Ala King has all of its ingredients except the broth in there. And that was the pimentos. Now the difference with the piccata, that's going to take quite a bit more stuff. And I'm going to start with some capers. I love capers. If you don't like capers, leave them out. For the piccata, you want to put in 1 tablespoon of capers per jar. And I'm going to have a few left over, which is cool. I can add them to salads or whatever. Wish I had saved some of that liquid, but it is what it is. All right, so there's my capers. All right, I had to pause for a minute, figure out how to get a wine cork out of a wine bottle without a corkscrew. And Mr. Google's your friend. They said put a steak knife in there and twist it, and it worked just right. So, yes, I don't drink, you guys. I rarely have any alcohol, and wine isn't one of them. But 2 of these recipes called for wine, one being my piccata, which I need 2 tablespoons of a dry white wine for this recipe. 1 and 2 per jar. Oh, whoops. That was for a quart. Well, that one's going to be pretty strong. 1 per jar. Because that was for a quart. I forgot I have these. And the last one. Whoop. All right, and believe it or not, this pot pie recipe calls for 2 tablespoons per quart as well. And I just got my paper all wet. Luckily, I can still read it, so we'll put 1 per in each jar. This is optional if you do not have it or you do not want to add it, but it does cook all of the alcohol out, so it will be alcohol free. It's safe to feed to your kids. They won't get drunk off of it. All right, so those 2 recipes got wine, and then my piccata is going to get some lemon juice as well. That takes a teaspoon per jar. I do use the bottled stuff. You could probably use fresh because it is pressure canning it. You have to use the bottled stuff if you're doing stuff like fruit or tomatoes, especially if you're going to water bath them, to make sure you have enough acidity. There we go. All right, so the last thing I have left, looks like, for my marsala is the balsamic. Okay, so for the marsala, I'm getting 1 tablespoon per pint, 2 per quart. Of course, if you have marsala wine, that's the preferable. I did look up acceptable substitutions, and balsamic vinegar was one of them. So I guess I should be calling this balsamic chicken. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and chop up my little bit of potato and add it to my pot pie recipes. Just double checking, seeing if there's anything else I need to add. I will have to rewrite my own recipes because I got them soaking wet. All right, so other than that, I need to add my chicken stock. Okay, this is where I differ from every recipe. I like to have a gravy come out of my jars. So I use clear gel. Well, let's see if I can tell you. Clear gel, which is safe for canning fruits and things like that. What I did was I have 16 cups of broth here, or a gallon of my turkey broth. It's bubbling very well. It's been seasoned with everything except the salt right now. I like to put my salt and my clear gel together in a jar. It doesn't seem to clump as much. And I love these old shaker tops because I could shake a little bit in, then I could stir it and let it dissolve, because clear gel, at least in my opinion, it tends to get a little clumpy if you add it too fast. Normally with fruit you would add it in with your sugar so it doesn't clump as bad. But for me, it still clumps no matter what I do. I'm going to shake it in, stir it, and keep doing this, and I bring it until my broth is thickened. For this much, now this is trial and error, because I've looked at the website, and it really doesn't give you a full, detail of how much to use. I did find somewhere on the Hoosier website it said 1 tablespoon per cup of liquid to make a gravy. So I'm not using 16 tablespoons, which is a 1/4 cup anyway. The bottle itself says a 1/4 cup per quart. I have about 1/3 of a cup in here. A little over, it was a heaping, a little bit more than a 1/4 cup. And I'm just going to keep adding it until I get the consistency that I want. So when I take these out of the jars, I already have my gravy made. Otherwise, if you're not comfortable doing this, go ahead and just put your broth in there, your seasoned broth, however you make it or buy it, and dump the ingredients out, but keep the broth and thicken that with cornstarch or flour, however you like to thicken. I got to turn this down a little bit, it's starting to splash. That way, you do what you feel safe doing. If I get a lot of lumps in here, what I do is I take my immersion blender and I go ahead and get rid of as many lumps as I can. They're not too bad right now, but adding it to a boiling hot liquid seems to help it dissolve a little bit better. I also have my pressure canner going. It's getting I want that water boiling when I put these hot jars in there, or almost boiling. I'm using the 4 jars lids. This is new to me. I have not used them, and I'm not sponsored, unfortunately, by them. But I am using their lids, and they recommend that you heat them up. So I am doing that currently. So once I get all of this in the jars, then I'll be ready to put my lids on and set them in the canner. And I do a couple at a time, get them in that hot water. This All-American 921 holds, it's a double stacker, so I try to get the jars done as close together as possible. Now, if you were doing this according to the guidelines from Ball or those things, you would need to have all of your other ingredients boiling hot. I don't do that. I do add 5 minutes onto my pressure if I don't think they're hot enough. And by the time my canner brings it up to pressure and I vented it for 10 minutes, I'm pretty sure they're hot. So I'm going to continue this until I get it to the thickness that I like. Okay, I'm not sure if you could see this, but it's turned into an almost gravy consistency, not quite as thick, because once it cools down, it's going to thicken. And just to tell you guys, I over-salted it, so I did add another quart and a pint of unsalted broth to this, so I did have to add some more of the thickener. I probably have about 1/2 cup total in this entire thing. So now I'm going to go ahead and get it ready for my jars. Alright guys, I apologize. You did not get to see me put them in the canner, but everything was pressure canned for 75 minutes. Then once it came down to 0, the pressure came down to 0 by itself, I let it set for another 10 minutes, and I just took the lid off. I'm going to let it sit for a couple minutes, let it acclimate to the room environment, and I'm going to move those over to my table to finish cooling until tomorrow. I did get smart, and I put certain kinds on each level. I have my Ella King and my Marsala here because I could tell the difference between the two, and then that way I can label the rest of them. I wasn't sure if the marker would stay on there, so I'm really surprised it did. But anyway, those are done. In my water bath canner, I have a couple minutes left. I made some peach. I'm calling it syrup. Let's call it a pancake topping. I did another video on that. I still have some tomatoes I need to work on tonight, but it's almost 6 o'clock, 5:30, and I need to make dinner. So the tomatoes will have to wait till after I'm done making dinner. And then I'm going to rest after the tomatoes.